describing to you the Unit 1 FRQ, the expectations, what I'm looking for, and more importantly, how to write it. So for the Unit 1 FRQ, what we're going to write is an argumentative essay. You're going to make a claim or a thesis statement, and you're going to back up your words with the documents taught in class and other concepts taught in class as well. So the question is this. It says, develop an argument that explains the three models of representative democracy, participatory, pluralist, or elite, best achieves the founders' intent for American democracy in terms of ensuring a stable government run by the people. And I say in your essay, you must articulate a defensible claim, that's create a thesis, support that claim with two pieces of evidence. And so when you begin to tell me why you're right, you must use one of these documents to bolster or support your argument, whether that's Brutus 1, Fed 10, U.S. Constitution, Declaration of Independence, or Federalist number 51. Your third paragraph is also going to be another paragraph explaining to me why you are correct, your claim is correct, and you can use information in these documents if you so choose to do so, but you can also go in another direction and maybe use something that you've seen before or read before, read in the textbook, maybe learned in another class that would bolster your argument as well. The last point of view that you're going to do is take the exact opposite perspective, the one you do not share, and you're either going to agree with it, you're either going to argue otherwise, or destroy it with facts. So we're going to go through this starting today on Friday, and when we come back from our 3-day break on Tuesday to kind of, determine what we're looking for, to take you through this step by step. Well, if we're asking you to, channel the mindset of the framers for what they believe the American democracy should look like and link it up to a representative democracy, it'd probably be best that we have a review sheet. So that's what I've created for you. I've created a review sheet that discusses those very things. And rather than give some sort of hot take or opinion on the founders, what we're going to do is use their words that were written in the Federalist Papers or the Constitution or the Anti-Federalist Papers as well. So I've pinpointed a couple for you, like for example, Fed 10, discussing factions, how they're dangerous, and how a large republic that fosters diversity of thought and competition and compromise best preserves liberty. But I've kind of done a couple more. So read those real quick. It summarizes the key points to it. Then we talked about in class Brutus 1, the Anti-Federalist paper that discusses why states should not vote for the Constitution. We identified two major themes: the very strong central government with a lot of power was a concern to them, and the No Bill of Rights, which are identified in those bullet points. And we later go on to talk about the fact that they were nervous about a standing army and the chance could be used against its people. The necessary and proper clause was written in such vague and general language that the Anti-Federalists saw it as like a ticket for a never-ending power grab, if you will. And the last thing that we talked about is, the fact that, in this new large republic, can one person represent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people? Is that logical to believe that? The Anti-Federalists believed that these offices would recruit the worst people, the people that were hungry for power, and that they would go off to Washington, D.C., and they would cut ties with the people and work for their own goods as well. We went on to talk about the Declaration of Independence, the three major ideas in there, that the popular sovereignty, that the population reigns, people are the source of power. And we talked about the people are born with natural rights. That's another theme of life, liberty, and property. And the last theme we discussed with that was that, governments are created by men, and governments are given the task to protect those natural rights. And if they do not protect those natural rights, then the people have the right to get rid of said government and create one that does. We also talked about the Constitution in Federalist number 51. We'll start with the Constitution, of all the safeguards that were put in place to prevent, the concentration of power in the hands of one person or one group. We talked about themes like popular sovereignty, the population reigns, we the people who have all the power are giving the government the following tasks and powers to conduct. We talked about how they divided power so no one branch or person would would control all parts of government with separation of powers, the lawmaking power into a legislative, executive, and judicial branch. We later go on to say another theme of that is checks and balances. Prevents abuse of power where one branch can control or influence the actions of another. One thing I didn't put down in here, but I wish I would have now that I'm looking at it with the Constitution, is supermajorities. Supermajorities, fostering widespread support before major actions could take place as well. But the one thing I did put down here is, if separation of powers and checks and balances isn't enough for you, they also put in a double level of security by creating a federal system of government where we divided the power between a federal government and states. And Federalist 51 kind of has similar language. It discusses the safeguards. I mean, look, I think the framers, I hate to give a hot take here, but I will. I think the framers in Federalist 51 of the Constitution are telling you that, listen, look at all the things that we've put in place to protect the rights of the people and the states. I know this powerful government, or this Constitution, provides more power to the central government, but we've put so many safeguards in place to protect the people and the states. And so when you look at Federalist number 51, popular sovereignty, once again, the people have the power. Breaking up power, dividing power, separating power into three branches. Dividing power amongst a federal government and the states. Dividing power even in the congressional branch, legislative branch, between the House and the Senate. And we later went on to talk about the fact that they set up the election of Congress to prevent against tyranny or a group that might go off the rails. We said the House is elected by the people, the only group in the beginning that was directly elected by the people. They were tied to public opinion because that's who elected them. But the Senate was not. The Senate was elected by the state legislatures. So their allegiance to the people, they had allegiance to the people, but it wasn't as strong because they didn't have to fear the public because the public was not necessarily their voters. They will take the public into account. I don't mean to go overboard there as well. So they do have the public in mind. But listen, as far as the people that are putting them into office, it's not the public. So the Senate set up as more of a cooling body, and so their mindset was intended to more importantly of what's best for people overall. Let's not do the rash thing. Let's not do the emotional thing. Let's do the right thing. And they have the right, they were set up that way. They were set up with 6-year terms to give them the right to not always worry about being reelected. They were set up with a state legislature election that allowed them to kind of think about state goals rather than individual goals. So there's a lot of safeguards put in place. So that's what I was trying to get at with the words of the framers. Now, as far as representative democracies go, I kind of highlighted some of the points of those too on this worksheet where I said, okay, look at a participatory democracy. Now, one thing that I want to reteach is this. Please don't link the participatory representative democracy to a direct democracy where old school Athens or old school Greece where everybody is participating in all parts of life. How I want to describe this one to you would be this, is that the public does have a large role to play in making policy decisions, and they do have a large role to play in participation. But some examples of that would be like a town hall meeting is held by an elected representative, okay? So we'll say Sherry Bustos decides to hold a town hall meeting. So people in her district show up and they voice their opinions and they tell positives and negatives of viewpoints of what is going on, and they try to influence the affair too. So the elected representative, is listening to the people. The people have a clear channel voice to that elected representative, whether they be at the federal level, the state level, or the local level. And those town hall meetings have the ability to frame that person's opinion. So when they're voting on particular issues, they are thinking about those individuals in the words that they heard and the opinions that were shared. Another one that we didn't cover too much that I'll cover right now is initiatives and referendums. An initiative is this ability of the citizens have the ability at the state and local level, for the most part, to get their ideas on the ballot. And so like for the state of Illinois, I believe it's like somewhere close to around like 363,000 signatures. and you can get an idea on the ballot. Now, most recently, we've seen groups do this, and they use an initiative to be like, should the state of Illinois or the state of Iowa or whoever legalize marijuana for recreational use? Or should the state raise the minimum wage to this? Or should the state change up its taxation system or what have you? But it's a way for citizens to get around a state legislative body or a local legislative body that might not be listening to the people or might be adverse to what the people's wants. Now, that referendum is the vote on that particular issue. Like, should the state of Illinois legalize marijuana recreationally? Should the state of Illinois raise the minimum wage to $15? It's a way, to turn these ideas over to the people so politicians can figure out, all right, let's put this in the hands of the people, see what the people want. That's what we'll do. Another one that I should have put down here that I didn't is the ability to protest, to influence various different policies, maybe through protest or maybe through contact with elected representatives. But participatory has a broad role for the public as well. Now, on the pluralist democracy, what we're talking about here is that people are not necessarily working on an individual level, but they're working on a group level. So this would be where you would join like an interest group, if you will, like the NRA or the National Organization of Women. And you belong to that group. Now, that group is going to represent you in Washington, D.C. They're going to represent your interests. They're going to try to push for policy. They're going to try to introduce policy. But along the way, what you're going to find out is there's more than one interest, hence the plural, more than one. And it was hoped for in a pluralist democracy that all these groups, whether they be citizen-based or business-based or what have you, would be in D.C. And yes, they could be there, but they would compete against each other for influence. And they would try to get their policies passed, but they would have to, try to influence legislatures and try to form bonds with maybe other interest groups that share their interests so that they increase their numbers, but they might have to compromise along the way. And hopefully this competition of ideas produces the best results for all of us. That's a pluralist democracy. So maybe that best represents the aims of the framers. The last one right here is going to be an elite form of democracy, where we have the situation where the people turn over a decision to an elite group, a group of informed citizens or a small group of people. That's our elite. So we see that in real life with the Electoral College. The people don't vote formally elect the President of the United States. It's the Electoral College. So we've turned over that power to a select group of people. One other example of this that I've heard off the cuff of people talking is whenever they're talking about any government policy. We'll take, for example, like energy. You might hear people say, why don't we just find the 5 smartest people for energy in the United States, put them in a room and have them develop policy? I mean, they've got the experience, they got the expertise, that's who should be making policy. So that's an elite form of democracy right there as well. Now, the last part of this is going to be filling out this outline FRQ to kind of organize your thoughts. So what I'm looking for here for this position is I'm looking for you to take a claim. So we're asking you to develop an argument for which model of representative democracy, participatory, pluralist, or elite, best achieves the founder's intent. So you got to make a claim here. So you could say maybe, it is my belief that a participatory democracy best achieves the founder's intent for American democracy. And maybe down here you go, it is my opinion that an elite form of representative democracy best achieves the founder's intent for American democracy. Now, this part and this part are all going to be one sentence, okay? So you'll combine the two. Now, it's critical here that you use the word because. Because is the key that opens up major points to this FRQ. So what you want to go is, it is my belief that a participatory democracy best represents the founder's intent for American democracy because, and then you want to kind of go back here and say, okay, if this is what the framers wanted, this is what their themes were, then I believe that this choice, best epitomizes or represents popular sovereignty or the preservation of liberty, whatever it is. It can be whatever 2 points you believe that this particular model of representative democracy does best, that would please the framers. And the same thing over here. What 2 things does an elite form of democracy do that would best achieve the founders' intent for American democracy? So this is all one sentence. So it is my belief that this does this because point 1 and point 2. Now, as far as evidence goes, this one will be a little tricky. I want just kind of introduce it and try this out. But here's what you're doing. You're taking whatever you put for number 1 here and you're bringing it down here. Let's just say it's popular sovereignty, that a participatory democracy best serves the idea of popular sovereignty. Okay, that's what you put there. But this is where you get long-winded. This is where you do all your explaining. You have to tell me, the reader, how exactly a participatory democracy best serves popular sovereignty and how that best achieves the founders' intent for American democracy. Okay? So you have to be able to do that. Now, one of these pieces of information has to come from one of those founding documents. So you could say, introduce the Declaration of Independence and how popular sovereignty is a very popular item in there. And you are going to tell me exactly how a participatory democracy best epitomizes that idea in the Declaration of Independence and how it would please the framers as well. Your second piece of evidence goes here, and once again, explain how exactly it fulfills that promise or fulfills the founders' intent for American democracy, and go from there. So it's not, this part right here is difficult, but we're at least going to get some words down, and we're really going to do some good work on this starting next week. But I want you to have something down. Now, besides having 1 and 2 right here done, then the back half of this is something that we have to work on. And so what I'm saying is, people always have a hard time starting a paper and ending a paper. So this is like a step-by-step instruction on exactly how to start a paper. So what I always tell my people, my students, as far as like writing an argumentative essay, is it should be about 2 sentences. Should be about 2 sentences. And your first sentence, what you want to do is address the counterpoint. So whatever one up here that you didn't have a lot of words for, that was more difficult to argue, okay, use the other side. Use the other side. But when you start off your essay, what you want to say is, some people believe that an elite form of democracy best serves the interests of the framers because point 1 and point 2, period. That's your first sentence. Then you want to create some sort of transitional word or phrase that tells me I'm about to argue the opposite. So then you want to say, however, it is my belief that a participatory democracy best serves the framers' intent for American democracy because point 1 and point 2. Now remember, because is critical. If the reader sees because, it unlocks future points for your essay. And then once all that's done, you're going to bring it down here. Some people believe this because point 1, point 2, period. However, comma, it is my belief that this because point 1 and point 2, period. And that's what you need. And that's what you need. So when you come back here on Tuesday, we want to have this all filled out. This all filled out and ready to go. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to reach out at all points in time. I wish you the best 3-day weekend of all. Take care, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday.